Thanks everybody for joining tonight. We are covering horse, hawk, herring practicum information tonight. I am your host this evening, Mary Alice Moore, class coordinator. You're already familiar with my name and face probably. Frank Stepanski is on the call with us tonight as well. He's one of our senior tech fellows and is involved in keeping practicum organized and orderly and help with the running of practicum. Frank, did you want to say hello and introduce yourself in case you're new to anybody?
You say horse, hawk, herring five times fast, Mary Alice.
Horse, hawk, herring, horse, hawk, herring, horse, hawk, herring, horse, hawk, herring.
That's actually really good.
I think that was three.
Yeah, I was thinking I couldn't do that. Hi everyone. My name's Frank. Um, if you don't know me, I've been here at Coach Dream for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. I work on the classes stuff. Maybe have seen me around, practicum stuff, career stuff for our apprentices, and some internal projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank. We also have Gina and Roy on the call, and Diana as well. Sorry, I just saw you pop up there, Diana, or rather my eyes just spotted your name. I think you've already been on the call for a little while. So some of your cohort leaders are on. Cohort leaders, if there's anything I'm leaving out, please feel free to unmute and interrupt me so that students don't miss out on any information. But I think we've got everything in the slides. Okay, well, we'll jump right in. Our general agenda for tonight, we're going to give you the general information as far as the what, when, who, why, how. There's another one that's fun to say 5 times fast, right, Frank? On practicum. Talk a little bit about how it's structured, what a week in practicum kind of looks like and feels like. Talk about the curriculum a little bit, what to expect, kind of how it's the same, how it's different from classes. We'll cover apprenticeship information, and then at the very end, we'll have question and answer. If you have questions that come to mind at any point throughout, though, feel free to use the chat and or unmute and interrupt me with questions is fine too. And yeah, let's go ahead and get going. So the first thing is, what is practicum? Hopefully you remember from the student orientation that after your 18 weeks of advanced classwork is done, you'll have a little bit of a gap. It's about a 3 to 4 week gap between the very last official day of class and when practicum begins. And practicum is an 8-week long group project followed by 2 weeks of career prep content to help kind of give you some tools in your toolbox as you venture out into the applications world and job seeking world. The practicum is small teams of about 5 students. Each team has at least one dedicated mentor that will be working with them. You'll be building on the skills that you learned throughout class. And most importantly, you'll be learning sort of those collaborative skills of how to communicate with other developers on a team as you build something together collectively. And get a little experience and exposure to some of the project management tools and workflows that happen in the industry. When is practicum? So your last official day of classes is October 15th. You'll be presenting your final projects on October 16th. Sorry, was there a question? Was there a question?
No.
We're good? Okay. The final projects will be October 16th, 17th, 18th. And then the practicum begins officially on Monday, November 11th. It's going to run kind of Monday through Friday, basically, unless your team determines otherwise. Like if all of you have heavy work days on Mondays, Tuesdays, and you want to do Tuesday through Sunday, that's fine. But give yourself sort of an average part-time work week kind of feel to your work in practicum. And it'll end on Friday, January 31st is when all of the 8 weeks plus the 2 weeks of career prep wrap up. But you'll present you demonstrate and present your projects on Friday, January 17th. So 17th is demo night, 31st is the end of practicum. Questions up to this point? We're good. Okay, so who's involved in practicum? From the student side, it's going to be students who have completed their advanced class final project in time and want to pursue the apprenticeship position or want to gain team experience and resume build and skill build, or just want more experience with what you've learned in class to be able to kind of see it from a different angle, build something besides a to-do list app or a blog or app or things of that variety. So it gives you a little more versatility with what you've been using in class to build something new. The mentors might be mentors from your class, they might be mentors from previous classes, or it could be a completely new volunteer that reached out to our program and said, hey, I want to help and I want to help in a project management capacity. Put me with Practicum. You are welcome to reach out to any of your class mentors and ask if they will mentor your group. Obviously, not all of them will have availability to do that. If they have questions about time commitment or what's all involved or what Practicum is like, they can reach out to Frank, myself, or Reed. So if you're approaching a mentor, let them know there are resources to reach out to if they have questions before they decide if they can or cannot help your team. And the purpose of Practicum, the reason why we offer this after the advanced classes and what we're really hoping students gain from it is to get a taste of what it's like to work on a development team. If you're interested in the apprenticeship position, it lets you kind of feel what it would be like to be an apprentice because you would be working with other recent grads that had been accepted into the apprenticeship program. So they're at the same sort of technical skill level as where you're at if you get accepted into the apprenticeship level. And it just gives you a good chance to continue practicing with your skills. It lets you see some of these structures that are in place as far as writing up tickets, handling tickets, merge conflict resolution, all of those kinds of good things that come with being a developer that is not an island and works with other developers. So we strongly encourage anybody to participate in Practicum. You do have the option of like if you're in React or you're in Node right now and your intention was to take React or Node next term, then you can hold off on your Practicum now and do Practicum at the end of your second advanced class. If you're wanting to go that path, that's totally fine to do. You can also do a practicum after each advanced class if you're wanting to. Everybody's path looks different. Consider what it is that you're wanting to really hone as far as skills go and what you want to practice with. So that way you can decide what's going to wind up being best for you. If you want to advanced class practicum, or advanced class practicum. All right. How do you participate? So you will complete a registration form. It's going to be posted in your announcements channel for several weeks leading up to the end of class. We need to receive that registration form just like you registered for the class you're in right now. We need to receive that registration form no later than Tuesday, October 15th in order to account for you and start organizing teams for anybody that hasn't organically formed their teams throughout the next 6 weeks. So you must register by Tuesday, October 15th at the latest. All right. Questions
Oh,
about
can I?
yeah, go ahead, Frank.
So one thing I just noticed, there's a question in the chat. Will asked, can I take part in Practicum this round and go back to another advanced class? Yeah, so just like Mary Alice mentioned, you can kind of take Practicum after your first advanced course, and then you can continue on taking another advanced course. And then if you want, take another Practicum if you want, or you don't have to. So you can do any number of like advanced Practicum, advanced, another Practicum, or not advanced Practicum.
Exactly.
If that answers your question. And also going back, if you go back to the previous slide just for a second too.
Will do.
Um, so also what Mary Alice was mentioning is like some of the road maps, I guess you could call it, where if you want to apply for apprenticeship, you have to do at least one practicum. That makes sure that's one question you may ask. And if you're not interested in apprenticeship, I just like Mary Alice mentioned, it's highly recommended that you still do at least one practicum because whatever you're learning now in whatever advanced course you're taking now, it's not going to be enough. Like it will not be enough to get a job. So you have to have experience working in a team. What you're building on your own is gaining those skills, those understandings of things that are going to be used in a group at a job, working a team. But if you don't have experience working in a team, they're not even going to look at you. So this is like essential. Like it's not required, but obviously if you want to apply for an apprenticeship, it is required. But if you want any chance of like looking and getting a job, you have to have some sort of group experience. That's like the first thing a recruiter will ask you. So that I just want to kind of really like highlight like how important like working in the team is and getting that team experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of add to Will's question in the chat, as well as the answer that we had shared, You can dual enroll if you want to. It works for some people, it doesn't work for some people. So consider your schedule, consider the amount of time that you would have to commit to both of these. Consider the fact that the practicum is going to be happening over the holidays as well too, if you have a busy winter season. So the advanced classes in fall start October 30th. Your practicum starts November 11th. So you would have 2 weeks of the fall advanced classes before practicum begins. But there can be some hectic times when you're first setting up practicum, getting with your team, deciding what you want to build, all of that stuff. So keep that in mind. After your practicum ends, there is a 5-week gap between when your practicum ends and when the spring advanced classes begin. So you will have a little bit of breather post-practicum before the spring advanced classes, just to kind of give you the lay of the land for how that timeline winds up looking like. Okay, perfect. Let's keep on rolling. So the structure of practicum for React and Node students that are on the call, you want to form a group of 5 people, 3 React students, 2 Node students. So that way a Node student has support of another Node student, and you can kind of pair program and work together to build the back end. And then the React students will help build out all of those components and the structuring for the front end, and work with getting your API call to connect with your Node backend. So that's the structure that you're wanting to go for as far as how your team is going to be built. These groups of 5 students, 3 React, 2 Node, will have a primary mentor plus or minus an apprentice assistant mentor. You also might have multiple mentors. If your primary mentor is really focused on React and not very strong on Node, we'll pair them with a strong Node mentor. So that way both front and back end are fully supported. Dual enrolled students, yes, they can participate as either front or back end. Frank, would you recommend they do a little of both in their team, or would you recommend they pick an end and focus on it for practicum?
It kind of really depends how confident you feel on one or the other. Usually, most people feel confident in either one side or the other, React or Node. So I would, definitely focus more on what you're comfortable with, but still try to take some tickets during that time of your practicum to get experience on both. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, that hits the chat question that popped up. So the bullet points here just kind of reiterate a team should consist of 3 React students, 2 Node students. Those dual enrollers follow Frank's advice that he had just encouraged. You can approach those class mentors and ask if they would mentor your team. They might say no. They might have already agreed to mentor another team. If you don't get a mentor, don't freak out. We are reaching out to volunteers and talking with volunteers that approach our organization that want to work with us, to see where they would best fit and make sure that every team has mentorship. And of course, the practicum also has Frank and myself if assistance or information is needed. The structure for Ruby on Rails students that are on the call, so all of you silver darlings, the team should consist of 4 to 5 Ruby on Rails students on a team. Again, you're encouraged to approach class mentors, ask if they would mentor your team. Same kind of rules apply. They might say no, they might have already agreed to another team. And you also have Frank and I as backup for structural things. What the overall structure of the practicum looks like is every week your team will be meeting all together as a whole group to be able to catch up on who's done what over the week and to plan what your next week is going to be looking like. So for React and Node students, you would meet with your end once as well. So just the React students meet together, make sure you're on the same page, getting things built. Node students meet together once, make sure you're on the same page, getting things built. And then that meeting where front and back come together, your mentors will be on that all group meeting. If they have availability and or you need them or want them to join your end meetings, you can talk to them about that as well too. And just kind of plan and work out as far as where are we at so far, where do we need to be going. So it's always good to have regular weekly check-ins. Communicating regularly is really, really important. So throughout your weekdays, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning, your week might look a little different from team to team based on what everybody's availability is like in your team. But you should have some sort of like a stand-up daily, where you're saying, this is what I finished, this is what I'm working on, this is what's keeping me from getting my work done. Sometimes somebody else has to finish a part of their code that your code relies on before you can proceed with what you're doing. So in instances like that, it's important to make sure everybody's aware of who's doing what, what's the status of what everybody's working on. The stand-up doesn't have to be in person, so you don't have to join a call every single day. A lot of teams will just do an asynchronous one where there's a post in your team's Slack channel and you say, what's everybody working on today? And you just give a quick brief. I finished this, I'm working on this, I need help with this. Also, you'll have some sort of ticketing process that you use. Some teams have elected to use a product like Jira. Some people use just GitHub projects, some other form of Kanban board where you can keep track of who's doing what, specifics of what the what is that they're doing, and know at what point are they in it. Have they just started it? Are they working in the middle of it? Is it finished and needing review? That kind of a thing. So those things will be happening daily during your weekday as your team. So that way everybody's clear on who's doing what and where everybody's at with their work. The primary goals that we want you to focus on as you're working through Practicum is to learn about these workflow processes. So Agile, Scrum, stand-ups, the importance of communication. If you're sick, say, I'm sick. I don't know how many days I'm going to be out, because what you can't do because you are sick could affect the work of others. So you really need to get a team mindset for Practicum and communicate the bejesus out of it. It's really important for everybody to be able to know what's going on and know if they need to help pick up slack if somebody's not feeling well or has had an emergency or has family things going on or whatever. So communicate, communicate, communicate. Cooperate and collaborate with others too on one body of code. So far in classes, you've just been touching your own code. So now you get to see how other people write their code. You get to look at code you haven't written and make sure you understand what it's doing and how it's functioning, all of those good skills. The process and tools that are used to manage projects, you'll be working with some of those, like I had mentioned about a ticketing process, working with repositories, working with deployment techniques, all of those kinds of things. You'll see how merge conflicts happen and are handled and are resolved. You'll practice a little bit of code review. So it's always good practice for you to look at your class, your teammates' code, give advice, make sure everybody's good before anything gets merged, all of that good stuff. And build and deploy an app, obviously, which is fun and exciting in and of itself. We also don't want to leave out of this primary goal the importance of demoing your work. Whenever you are interviewing for a job, you have to talk about your experience. You have to talk about what you're familiar with. And a great way to do that is to demo your work. Explain what part of it you helped build, explain how the app overall functions, what its purpose is, what it's built out of, all of those good things. So yeah. There's some differences that you'll notice as you're working through Practicum compared to class. So as far as your time commitment, we expect Practicum to be similar to class as far as 15 to 20 hours of work a week, roughly, is what you should be shooting for. If you're way less, then maybe you should be taking on more things to help your team out. If you're way more, then things need to get shuffled around because nobody should be putting 40 or 60 hours of work into Practicum. That's a little bit of overkill. So communicate about if work is too light or too heavy for you so things can get balanced across the team. Similar to class, you're going to have weekly lessons. So we've got your curriculum broken down into 4 sprints. Each sprint is 2 weeks long. That's also something that's similar and found often in the industry. So it gets you kind of familiar with this concept of an iterative approach of working on your project. And the sprints will have particular things that they focus on each week of the sprint, and each sprint has its kind of its own theme as far as like your first sprint is going to be make sure you're all aligned as far as what your project is, get just the skeletons of things up and running and go from there. And then you'll move along as you kind of progress through and build bits and pieces to your project. Anything I'm forgetting or that you want to add at this point, Frank?
Just a couple little things. So like the time commitment, as Mariana said, is going to be close to the time commitment for your advanced classes, but I would say it'll be a little bit more. And if you can put more, I would put more if you can. It's not a requirement, of course, but I would put more. But also the time commitment will be more synchronous than asynchronous, right? So like when you're taking a class, you get the work done when you want to, 5 in the morning, 10 p.m. at night, whenever you want to, right? And then obviously the only synchronous parts is when you want to attend mentor meetings. But since you're part of a group, part of a team, you have to like be flexible enough to meet when your team can meet. To when they ask a question or communicate, you have to be relatively available to reply back. Somebody doesn't want to post a question about something, and then you're not available till 2 or 3 days later. That's not how a team works, right? So you have to be available. It may not be like Mary said, like doing an actual meeting, but being able to be on Slack and reply to a question or post a question. So it's going to be more time for synchronous versus asynchronous. So that's one thing to kind of be aware of. And again, as also Mary said, communication. You communicate regularly with the team, and you'll be communicating regularly with your team. In practicum.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank.
Mm.
I think Roy had something to add too. Go ahead, Roy.
Not really. I was just going to reiterate that point, just because I know that both Frank and I have experienced situations where students were in drastically different time zones, as well as working different, shift of jobs in their real life. And that seems to be one of the biggest friction points in any one of the projects, because people who are working independently of the time of everybody else, they're not doing the interacting that is needed to get the work done. Because like Frank and Mary were saying, like the practicum is all about working as a group together. It's not just grabbing a ticket, finishing it, and then getting it back and then moving on to another thing. There's got to be a lot of interaction both between the teams members, as well as like the front end and the back end, and then finally between the actual students, as well as like the mentors who are kind of project managers and um kind of I would
Tech
say
leads.
consultancy. Yeah, they're tech leads. So yeah, like communication is key, and making sure that like you are actually able to show up to the meetings is very, very important.
100%. Thank you, Roy.
Also, when we form the groups, we will also ask you beforehand your availability, like during the week and or weekends, to kind of like pair the best that we can. Okay, well, we'll form this group based upon their availability, but of course, it's not going to be perfect. So there's going to be things where, okay, well, I don't really gel well schedule-wise with this team. If you feel you don't, initially reach out to me, reach out to Mary. I'll say, hey, you know what? Our schedules don't match. I'm just not available for these meetings. Is there any way I can move to another group, that has a better availability or closer availability to, and then we can do that. But you have to be proactive in telling us that, not just like, be passive and wait around and see if it'll work out weeks later. 8 weeks for the practicum for the coding part of it goes really fast. So if you feel schedule-wise it still is not working for you, reach out to Mary Alice or myself to try to get moved to a different team if possible.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the sooner we know things, the sooner intervention can help move things along. You will have less structure. So I had mentioned that you've got the curriculum that you can lean on as far as weekly lessons and sprint guidelines, but you all get to decide what you're building as a team. You come up with a concept, you come up with a product. And we can't account for every nuance of every type of project people can dream up. So for that reason, there is less structure to it. It's not going to be write this line of code, build this particular thing. It's going to be, have you accounted for authorization? Have you accounted for error handling? What have you done for testing? So there are things of that nature that are just sort of general to keep in mind and consider how that applies to your group specific project and the features that you're going to be including in your product. So you'll have those team objectives that are kind of outlined as far as make sure your project does XYZ, and then ticketing systems and or how you break up who's building what will be individual tasks. So that'll be different from class. You're not all doing the same thing. While one person is, working on styling, one person is building the first component, and one person's building a login page, and backends building their pathways, and there's just all kinds of things going on where you don't have a buddy that can say, hey, what did you get for answer 5, or how did you work through that particular part of the assignment this week? So there's a lot of more autonomy in this, where you'll need to be proactive about researching, figuring out how to solve your problem. It doesn't mean you have to do it all on your own for your individual task, but it does mean that you need to communicate with others if you're having a problem, and you need to find ways out of that problem. So it's going to be a very more active, less passive kind of experience. Regular communication with your team, more collaboration, and then, of course, the career prep information that's part of Practicum will be completely new, since we don't really touch on much of anything career prep wise, other than maybe like imposter syndrome and that kind of thing in your course. All right. So what to expect? It will be a fast pace. 8 weeks is not a long time to build a project. So don't wait to get help. Help each other. Ask for help from your mentor. Focus on your team and your individual learning and skills. The project itself is a byproduct, but you want your byproduct to be a good product. So make sure that you're stretching your skills, getting out of your comfort zone, but that you're also meeting the expectations of what the team agrees on as far as what you want your product to be and how you want it to look. Communicate, communicate, communicate. If somebody's not attending meetings, if you can't attend meetings, speak up. If you're sick, let somebody know. If you're gone because of travel, let somebody know. If you've had a change in job or housing situations, let somebody know. That will impact your ability to contribute work. You can tell Frank or I, you should tell your team, you should talk to your mentors. There's no amount of talking that you can do that will be too much. So please be sure that you communicate when life changes or when something is trying to throw a wrench in your works. At the end of Practicum, you'll do a self-evaluation. If you're applying for the apprenticeship, your self-evaluation is your application to the apprenticeship program. You'll also evaluate your peers in your team on engagement, technical skills, communication, collaboration, initiative. You'll do your presentations, 5 to 10-minute demos of your project about your experience in Practicum, what you contributed to the project, all of that good stuff. And just as a final reminder, self-evaluation is your apprenticeship application. Part of the apprenticeship application also is taking a coding assessment and interviewing. So keep those on the horizon. Anything to add to this slide, Frank, or any questions that folks have?
Okay.
I have a question about the coding assessment.
Mhm.
Do you know roughly how long that is?
We give you 4 hours. I haven't looked at the averages of how long it takes people to do it. It kind of varies from person to person, but you do have a 4-hour window in which to have to complete it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. Okay, availability requirements. So your availability must include, you have to be available for 2 synchronous meetings on 2 separate days. You need to check and respond to your Slack channel asynchronously every day. Keep an eye on what your teammates are doing, questions that are out there, talk about what you're doing, questions you have, and you need to be able to work with your team for a minimum of 10 to 20 hours of time per week. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about the assessment in a few minutes when I cover apprenticeship stuff too. But yes, I'll answer some information about those. I won't forget your questions in the chat. If you're going to be inactive for a week for any reason, you need to notify your mentors. You need to notify myself and Frank, so that way we are aware and we can either get students to help out on teams as a supplement. We can see if there are past graduates that can come and help out a team to support. There are lots of options we can do to help support and restructure teams in the event of situations like this. So again, communicate, notify your mentor, notify myself and Frank. If you don't notify us and you're not attending your meetings and you're not regularly communicating with your team and you're missing meetings, then we can remove you from Practicum. It doesn't kick you out of the program, but it definitely would warrant a conversation before you move through our program. If you are dual enrolled and that's why you're stepping back, or that's why you kind of lost track of things and inadvertently wound up not participating in Practicum the way you intended to, it's not going to pull you out of another class if you're dual enrolled. But talking is much better than just letting things happen and frustrate people who don't know what's happening because you're not talking. Anything to add to availability requirements that you want to share, Frank?
No, I think you covered everything. Yep.
And if you are removed from practicum, it doesn't mean that you can't attend a future practicum. Again, it just means we need to have a conversation about expectations for what you would do in the future practicum and make sure that things are good for you to be able to proceed and get that quality education and team development experience. Okay, so let's dive into the apprenticeship information because I know a bunch of you probably want those details. It is only available to U.S. and U.S. territory residents. U.S. work authorization is required. It is a salaried position, so that is why we have to have that in place. It is a full-time position, 40 hours a week. It's fully remote. It does have compensation with benefits. There are somewhat flexible hours. You will have meetings that you have to regularly attend. Like every Tuesday, we have a weekly cafe where everybody gets together to be able to touch base, connect with one another. Usually there's some kind of presentation or information shared that helps kind of supplement your skills or, expand your knowledge in some topic or area. We have skillets on Friday, which again are presentations from experienced developers that are volunteering to be able to show you this is how we use this product in our job, or to do mock interviews or whatever. There's all kinds of fun skillets that we've had. Let's see here. And of course, whatever project you're working on as an apprentice, you need to be there for stand-ups. You need to be there for any kind of project meetings that you have about the product that you're helping build. So that's why Practicum kind of lets you get a feel for that and eases you into that. It is a 9 to 12 month commitment where you will not be pursuing other employment during that time frame. It takes a while to onboard on a project and get comfortable working in that project, get comfortable with the code base. So if we had an apprentice join and we get them all learned up on the project that they're building and then they get hired out, then it kind of ruins the experience for what we can build for our client, and it resets us back to zero. So that's why we ask for that 9 to 12 month commitment where you are not looking for other jobs. You are assigned real world, real client projects as an apprentice. You will not necessarily have to do any client facing work as an apprentice. But know that what you're building is an actual product that's out there for a person who's paying for you to build that project. Most of the other developers are apprentices of varying experience levels. So whatever project you wind up landing on with our labs team, it might be several apprentices that have already been with us for 9 to 12 months or been with us for over a year. Or it might be folks that are joining the same time you're joining out of your cohort. So it's varying experience levels, but all of our projects have somebody that oversees them, a project owner, a project manager, a senior developer that oversees the handling and organization of dealing with those products and building those products. So that gives you a quick overview of the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship process, before I go on to that. So as I mentioned, the apprenticeship process is use your self-evaluation at the end of practicum to apply. You will be given a coding assessment. There's a 2-week window that we provide you with to take that 4-hour assessment. Whether you're taking Ruby, Node, or React, your test will be different. Because obviously a React student isn't going to be able to answer Ruby on Rails questions and vice versa unless you've been educated in those areas. The assessments we give you further details on as we get closer towards the end of practicum, but in general, there's some component that is like coding exercise where it'll be, here is an existing product, build this to add on to it, or here are some specifications, build something that does XYZ. Some of them have multiple choice questions on them. Some of them have free answer questions on them. It depends on which test you're taking as far as what all is included, but we give you all of the details. So it would be like, hey, for the Node test, you're going to have 3 coding challenge exercises and 20 multiple choice questions and 4 open answer questions, or whatever the breakdown is. So you'll have those details.
Does the apprenticeship potentially lead to like a junior dev job?
Not necessarily, but it can. I think most, if not all, of our junior devs that we have on staff right now were apprentices at some time or other with us.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that was a great question. Thanks, Dave. For the assessment, it's through CoderByte. So yeah, it's kind of similar to HackerRank. It's similar to some of the other platforms that are out there. CoderByte is the brand that we're using. Yes, as Frank had mentioned, 2 years is the limit. So if you love your first year of apprenticing, that first 9 to 12 months, and you want to continue apprenticing, you can, but once you hit your 2-year anniversary, then you would end your apprenticeship with us. We do have support systems in place as you get close to that anniversary deadline to help you look for and find the right job for you that's out there in the tech industry. Some folks are successful making that, some aren't. Again, it kind of depends on what is going on job market wise at the time. And anytime after that 9 to 12 months of your first apprenticeship, then you can start looking for jobs. So you can keep apprenticing for another year beyond that 9 to 12 month period while looking for jobs. So it's not like, oh, next week is your 2-year anniversary, find something quicker, lose it kind of a thing. You have plenty of time to be able to take a look. Some questions popping up in the chat that I just want to address to make sure I answer those. Yes, you can take other advanced classes while you are apprenticing. That is perfectly fine to do. You do need to get approval from your project manager as an apprentice to make sure that it's good to go. Usually in the first like 30 to 60 days of apprenticing, they don't want you to take an additional class because you're going to use all of your brain power getting comfortable with the project that you're on. But talk to your project manager and they can let me know, yes, you're okay to take a class, or no, hold off, let them take it next trimester. You can apply for the apprenticeship multiple times. That is a great question as well, too. Typically at the end of every practicum cycle is when those apprenticeships will happen. You can also retake practicum. So if you do practicum in November and you're like, that was fun, that was a great experience, I like that, there aren't other advanced classes I want to take, I just want to do another practicum and keep practicing and get comfortable with team development, then you're welcome to do that as well too. The timeline for that, so your all's practicum ends January 31st and the next one after begins on March 24th. So you'd have about a month and a half break before the next practicum begins. So yeah, you can definitely do multiple practica if you'd like to. Let's see here.
If you're thinking, well, if I don't get in the first time, what should I do? Or what gives me the best chance of getting in maybe the second time I apply or the third time I apply? So like Mara said, that the hiring periods are usually after every practicum. That's when we usually interview and decide what apprentices we will hire, depending on our need. Depending on how many apprentices we lose. We lose apprentices and then they get other jobs, and or we have new projects and clients come on. So it's, oh, we need a couple extra apprentices because we foresee a need in a month or 2 or 3 from now for some upcoming new projects, right? So but usually the way we look at apprentices, okay, what do they do in practicum? What were the evaluations from their peers and mentors? And then also, how were they in their classes? But the practicum work they've done is like the first thing we look at. So if you don't get in the first time around, your best chance is doing a practicum, because that's what we look at. You're always going to have weaknesses. So how do you best some of your weaknesses? You do it a practicum again and improve on that. So that's my advice to you, is like, if you don't get in the first time, do another practicum whenever that next time comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Focus on growth and improvement. The windows of time, in case people are curious, like what time of year do practicums kind of end or fall? So your alls will wrap up end of January. The one that begins in March wraps up around end of May, beginning of June. And then the next one after that starts around mid-July and ends around mid-September. So you'd be looking at January, May, June, and September, rough times throughout the year for when we're considering apprentices. Was there a question out there? Okay, cool. All right. So career development is a fairly new portion of Practicum. The current cohort of Practicum that is wrapping up in a few weeks was our first go round, adding these 2 weeks of career development. The 2 weeks are going to cover sort of developing a brand for yourself, talking about what technical interviews look like, how to build your confidence, how to network is a very big thing. So there's lots of things in that content that will help you as you're starting to job seek, whether that's happening during your practicum, whether that's happening during another advanced class you take with us, whether that's happening after you've apprenticed with us. So after that 8-week group project, then you will meet still as your team to talk about some content, but then we'll also have everybody in the practicum come together to be able to participate in a call similar to what we're doing now, to kind of talk about your experiences of that content and bounce ideas off of each other and just get a good feel of what that whole process of career searching is like. So you'll have 2 meetings with all practicum students talking about career next steps. Those meetings will be recorded. It's going to be conversations about apprenticeship, how to network, build your resume, LinkedIn tips. There's going to be weekly activities about career goals and networking, mock interviews, optional coding activities to understand what take-home assignments are like, similar to like the assessments that you take at the end of practicum as well too. And you'll have a career handbook given on the final week to be able to help guide you through the whole looking for jobs, applying for jobs process. And just to note and be aware for yourself, apprenticeship is only available to a small subset that apply. We can't give specific numbers because it varies based on how many apprentices are hired out to other places. So how many apprentices we lose, it depends on, as Frank had mentioned, the pipeline of what new projects we have coming in. We're a nonprofit organization, so it depends on grants and funding. So there are a lot of factors that go into how many people we can take each time. Usually it winds up being less than 25% of the people who apply will get offered an apprenticeship. And it's not because your technical skill isn't there. It's not because your knowledge or your experience through practicum was a bad one. It's we only have limited resources. We are a nonprofit organization, so we have those things tying our hands. Hopefully that's helpful information and reinforces, don't be discouraged if you don't make it into the apprenticeship the first time and it doesn't say anything about the quality of your work. It's just saying we don't have a spot for you right now. Okay, and then next steps. So this kind of touches on Will's question as far as how to form practicum groups. And the 3 React Node 2 Node or the 4 or 5 Ruby on Rails folks. So from here on out, we're going to be offering weekly mixers. It's going to be a roughly 1-hour phone, Zoom call, just like we're doing right now. So if you're available during the day and time that we have those mixers, hop on the call. We'll have some fun conversations. So that way you can get to know each other, meet classmates, meet people that are in other classes in your cohort. If you can't make them, that's okay. We will also be having posts go up every Wednesday afternoon with discussion prompts that are going to relate to the in-person, well, not in-person, the online mixers, the synchronous mixers that we do. So that way you can still contribute and share your thoughts and see what other people's thoughts are. The topics generally are like, what's some cool tech that you want? What's a product that you'd like to build someday if you had, carte blanche and could build whatever you wanted? What things do you like about the class that you're taking? What things frustrate you? Why did you pick the class that you're in? What do you, what interests you? What do you want to learn in practicum? So there's lots of fun, non-technical things that you'll be talking about to be able to get to know one another a little bit better and see kind of who you meld with and who you feel comfortable working with. The biggest thing is aligning your availabilities. Every Saturday, there'll be a post going out also in that HHH outlet channel that says, if you found a team but are looking for additional teammates, post here. If you are not on a team, share that you are not on a team and talk a little bit about yourself. There will be prompts to kind of help guide you because the first time around, nobody's going to be in a team by this Saturday. So there'll be some prompts to guide you as far as what to share about yourself. All of them, it's going to encourage you to share your availabilities so that way you can find people with similar availabilities. So yeah, you can form groups organically. That's what our hope is, because obviously groups work a little bit better if everybody's invested in voluntarily there. Sometimes groups can have a little bit of tension if they're kind of forced together just because, well, your availability is aligned. So here you go. So we encourage you to form groups organically if you're able to. So once you form a group, if you form a group, you're welcome to approach mentors, see if they can or would mentor your team in practicum. Again, they may tell you no, that's okay. It just depends on whether or not they're available or if they've already agreed to help another team. If and once you form a group, start discussing when you want to have your weekly 1-hour team meeting and or when you'd want to have your 1-hour end meetings, your front and back meetings. For Ruby on Rails, you wouldn't necessarily need that front and back meeting, but you may want to have opportunities throughout the week when maybe you just meet with one other teammate and you can kind of pair program together, or you can focus on a particular project, or even just kind of work while you're on a call together, just to feel that connection and have somebody available if you're like, hey, what about such and such? Complete a successful final project for your class. Complete the registration form by October 15th to be able to register and participate in Practicum. So that means 2 forms. You'll use the assignment submission form to submit your final project, just like you've been submitting weekly assignments all along. And then you'll have the separate form to register for Practicum saying, I am going to be turning in my final project. I expect to have availability for the duration of Practicum. Sign me up. So those are your next steps. Any questions, or does anybody need further clarity on mixers, on how to form a team, anything along those lines? And don't take it personal if while you're forming your teams, things change, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, actually, we needed an extra node person. So yeah, we're going to have this person on the team instead of that person. Those kinds of things happen. And I have never seen it be a personal issue of like, oh, I can't stand them. Let's get them out of the group. It's never been that way. It's been oh, but they're not available on Tuesdays. And so that's not going to work out for us. So yeah. Breakout rooms in the mixers. Yes, if the mixers are large enough, then we will do breakout rooms in the mixers. So that way you can meet with just like 3 or 4 people in a little group to talk about the topics and get to know one another. And we'll try and change up who you're with. And or if there's somebody that you see on the call, you can say, hey, can you put me in the same room as XYZ person? Because I'd like to get to know them better. So those will be good to go. Mixers will not be recorded. Just because it's not technical knowledge that you need to have. And it's kind of like seeing a recording of somebody talking about what they think or feel isn't the same as getting to talk to somebody about what they think or feel. So yeah. Any questions out there that we haven't answered? A couple of people asked me before too in previous classes if the November 11th to January 31st, is going to be a crazy nutso time for you and you just need to kind of hold off. That's fine. You can wait and do your practicum in March. I will need to know by early January if that's your intention. So that way I can make sure that I put you in the outlet channel for the fall classes so that you can meet individuals in the fall classes and form groups that way. So if you need to defer your practicum, that's totally fine to do. Just talk to me about it. So that way I can be sure that you're in the right channels to meet potential teammates with the fall class cohorts. Great question as far as who comes up with the project topic for practicum. I'm glad you touched on that. The team decides as a team what they want to do. Usually in those mixers, we'll have you brainstorming ideas of things that you might like to build. And then you can talk with people as you're forming your teams about, I thought this would be a cool idea to build. Does anybody else have interest in building a product like that? So you might find some commonality there as long as your availabilities align. So that's a good option. If anybody's stumped for ideas, we usually have ideas of products that would be great for us to use internally in Code the Dream. So if you're curious about ideas like that, feel free to reach out. I'll share that information with the cohort leaders who will be hosting many of the mixers from now to the end of class. So that way they can kind of put bugs in your ears about possible ideas too, if need be. Yes, Amanda had asked in the chat about a central place where you can post your availability. So I've got a post scheduled to go out Saturday around noon, I think, Eastern, that'll say, hey, it's time to start forming groups. Go ahead and share your name, which class you're in, what your availability is like, and some other tidbit of information to get to know one another. So the HHH outlet channel, boy, that's hard to say, is the best place to be able to share your availability asynchronously and kind of get an idea of where you have overlaps. Any other questions? You can pop them up in the chat or you can unmute and ask whatever you need to do. Tickets for projects can be a little of both. So sometimes especially early on, I think probably the mentors help kind of guide what the tickets look like and build them out. But students can also be contributing to that as well throughout.
What are what are some of the past projects that people have done?
Ooh, okay. I'm trying to remember some that have popped up into my head. I know they had sort of a Twitter-esque chat app that was built. There have been several that have been social justice focused. So it's about like uniting people who don't have resources with people who do have resources. Sometimes that looks like children's toys, being able to take gently used toys that are no longer wanted and get them into the hands of people who could use them, or finding resources for education, things like that. So it can really vary. Frank, what have been some of your favorites or things that jump anyway?
There's been ones that use so a lot of the well, I mean not a lot, but I know some of the projects been using third-party APIs to populate the data for the app, which has been defines what the app does. So like pet adoption is a very common one. I think every cohort we have at least one pet adoption. There's always open APIs for that information. We've also had some learning some similar learning apps that we have internally about like offering courses, course content, scheduling courses that we already have existing apps that do that. Communication kind of chat apps we've had in the past using WebSockets is kind of fun. That's been done at least twice. And then kind of anything that and also like hotel booking or travel apps. I know because there's not a ton of like travel APIs you can use to populate it, but there are some open hotel APIs you can use to populate. So that would be like, say, a hotel booking site. Because sometimes you just think when you think of an app, like, okay, well, where's the data coming from, right? Is it going to be like manually generated somehow, or going to be more realistic where it's getting populated by some existing store of data from an open API that someone can tap into? Yep.
Okay.
Also, when you think of the projects in your group, and also when I mentor some of the groups in the past, I always express like, okay, well, you have 8 weeks to work on this, but that doesn't mean you can stop in 8 weeks. So after 8 weeks, you do your presentations, then you have 2 weeks now of career prep, but you can also continue to work on it after. So there's nothing to say, oh, some of your group or your whole group can just continue working on it afterwards. So it's not like it stops, especially if like, you're applying to apprenticeship and you don't get in and you're kind of like, okay, well, I have some free time. What should I do? Apart from like maybe taking another course or eventually do another practicum, you still have maybe some free time for a month or 2 or 3. You can continue to work on your practicum as well as part of your group.
Other questions?
And where will these slides be posted?
I'll share them in that HHH outlet channel, so that way you'll have it for reference. The recording I'll post up there too. Your cohort leaders likely will also either link to that post or share it in your upcoming announcements as well too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Last call for questions.
For the apprenticeship, do you have a salary range? You said it was a salaried position, but I don't think we touched on around where that lands.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Amanda. So it can vary if you're in a high cost of living area. So if you're in, Boston, San Francisco, then it is slightly higher. Last I remember hearing it was 30,000 a year. But that number may have increased. It definitely would not have decreased any.
And that 30,000, was that for one of the high cost areas?
No, that was not for one of the high cost areas.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I believe 35 for the high cost, and then like every certain number of months there is like a small little standard of living bump that apprentices get. I don't know exactly how much it is, but they do give you a small bump every so number of months. Yeah.
And is that like is the apprenticeship like a typical 40-hour work week?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Mhm.
Cool.
I think there's also tech stipends, maybe an annual tech stipend that's included too. So that way, if you
Yeah, I
need,
think it's was it tech stipend 500 or 1,000 now?
I can't remember.
I think it. I know staff was at that. I think it's either 500 or 1,000 yearly tech stipend.
So if you need to upgrade your hardware, then
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can
They
help.
get unlimited PTO. So like, obviously there's negatives, but also the positives too. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. Well, if we haven't answered a question that comes to mind now or in the future, you know how to reach us. Always feel free to holler on Slack. Oh, there were a couple questions that hit real quick. Specific hours for the apprenticeship. No, our hours are flexible. Most work is usually done sort of 9 to 5 range, Eastern Pacific range as far as that goes. So I know that's kind of a big window of time. But once you are hired on as an apprentice, then you would be made aware of this is when your meeting times are with your team, or these are the meetings that you're expected to attend throughout the week. I'd say probably 4 to 5 hours of your 40 hours are meeting time a week, roughly. It might vary a little bit depending on what project you're on, but that would kind of give you a spitball at least. Mhm. All right, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for attending. Like I'd said, I'll post slides and recording in the HHH outlet channel. That's much harder to say than your class names altogether. And reach out if you have any questions. You can talk to your cohort leaders, you can talk to your mentors, you can talk to Frank and I. Just reach out if you need anything. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Reach out
Thanks,
any
Mary.
Thank
questions.
you all for your time.